So, I guess this is where I start. I begged my ex-husband to take me back, you know? But he said he couldn't. He couldn't because, well, I broke him. And, honestly, I don't even know if this is the right place to share something like this. Yet, somehow, the name of this group kinda fits the situation I got myself into. I'm really only posting this because my therapist, yeah, she actually suggested that I let it all out somewhere, and oddly enough, Reddit felt like a strange but fitting place for it. Okay, here goes. I'm a 42-year-old woman, and about 3 years ago, I cheated on my husband, who's the same age as me. It was a disaster, a complete catastrophe that shattered my family. And, seriously, not a day goes by where I don't regret what I did. We got together when we were, like, 19. We weren't each other's first or anything, but for 22 long years, I thought we were, well, happy. Sure, he had his moments when his temper got the better of him, but you know, he's the type who wears his heart on his sleeve. He's that kind of guy, always taking on so much crap, but when he finally lost it, yeah, he'd let it all spill out, and I got it. I understood because, honestly, I'm the same way. I do that too. And, yeah, I've said some really heartless things to him in anger, but he never, ever held it against me. Our sex life, it was actually great, you know? Well, at least it was from my perspective. Of course, he always wanted more. Like, seriously, he would try every single day. But I was a stay-at-home mom to 5 kids, yeah, 3 girls and 2 boys, and, honestly, I'd get exhausted. And, yeah, he'd voice his frustrations when we didn't have sex, and back then, I found it really annoying. I mean, thinking about it now, I guess we probably could have done it more often. He really did his part around the house, you know? He worked these grueling 60-hour weeks, but he'd still make sure I got to sleep in on weekends. I'd wake up to this pristine, clean house and a nice, hot breakfast he made just for me. As the years went on and our 3 eldest kids started heading off to college, I felt this emptiness creeping in. It was that whole empty nest syndrome thing. I was restless, a little stir-crazy. I mean, I still had my 2 boys at home, but they were in junior high and barely needed me the way they used to. My husband noticed this, and he actually encouraged me to get a job. Looking back, I probably should have just told him no. Maybe I should have found a hobby or, I don't know, done something different. My husband, he was always kind of stocky, slightly overweight, but still, I found him handsome. As for me, my weight fluctuated, seesawing between 150 and 210 pounds depending on the year. When I did decide to go back to work as a customer service rep, I was around 160 pounds, and I have to admit, I felt great. I mean, I hadn't been in the workforce in, like, 21 years, and it felt invigorating. It felt good, really good, to be back. But as the months went by, well, things got complicated. I started hanging out with these younger girls from the office. They were around 25, and honestly, my husband actually encouraged it. He thought it would be good for me to have some female friends since, well, I didn't really have any. I mean, I used to nudge him to go out with his coworkers, so it was only fair he did the same for me. But these girls, they planted these ideas in my head. They started making me think that I could do better. They made me believe my husband wasn't sexy enough. They made me feel like I was being held back. One of the guys at work, this male coworker, he even told me that my husband was just a beta pretending to be an alpha. And, God, I hate admitting this, but I bought into it. At the time, I really thought my husband was all bark and no bite. Sure, I'd seen him argue with people who ran their mouths, and he had no problem standing up to them, but I never saw him get into an actual fight. I don't even know where that idea came from. Deep down, I did love him. I really did. I respected him. Our friends were always telling me how lucky I was to have him, and I did feel lucky. But still, somehow, those people got into my head, and I started questioning my love for him. It was like this small nudge that wouldn't go away. Every time I talked to my coworkers, it got worse. Eventually, I started flirting with that same male coworker who called my husband a beta. He was the same age as me, but, you know, he was physically fit, handsome. As the weeks went by, one thing led to another. He made the first move, and I went with it. We were having sex every chance we got. I felt younger, more desired. And, God, I started treating my husband like absolute crap. I would deny him sex, make fun of his weight, and even try to make him feel like he was losing his mind when he questioned our relationship. I don't even know where that behavior came from. Thinking back, I'm horrified. It's like I don't even recognize who that person was. Things really came to a head one night when my husband crushed a glass cup with his bare hand. It was during dinner. He looked at me with these hateful eyes and said, "You have a hickey," before wrapping his bleeding palm and heading to urgent care. My sons just sat there, stunned. My eldest son's face turned beet red before he stormed off. I was in shock. I called my lover, furious, and he just laughed, saying he wanted to mark his territory. That was the first time I felt real disgust. Real, crushing remorse. My husband came home past midnight. He looked right at me, dead in the eyes, and asked, "How long?" I tried to deny it, but the truth was written all over my face. So, I told him. "For months," I whispered. He asked, "Did you suck his dick?" And I couldn't even answer. He walked past me, stopped just by my ear, and said in a low, venomous whisper, "I want a divorce, fucking slut." I was furious that he called me that. He'd never spoken to me like that before, and all I could do was cry. And then I noticed our boys, standing at the foot of the stairs, staring at me. Their faces were full of rage, and I felt angry at my husband for saying that in front of them. But, really, I should have been angry at myself. I should have been disgusted with myself. But at that time, I had these blinders on. My husband, he just shut down. It was like flipping a light switch. He checked out emotionally, and the love he had for me vanished. My female coworkers? Oh, they rallied behind me. They convinced me I was doing the right thing. They said I could be with my lover full-time now, and I bought into it. I really did. I didn't want the separation period, but it happened. My husband moved out, got an apartment just half a mile away. The boys treated me like I was scum. My daughters? They wouldn't even speak to me. And my lover? He started coming over to the house, despite me telling him not to. He ignored my protests, and that only made my kids angrier. When my ex-husband came to pick up the boys, he saw my lover and, with this unnerving smile, said, "Not yet." Just. Not yet, but soon. It was terrifying. My ex-husband was so calm, and I felt this deep, gnawing dread. When they left, I snapped at my lover, told him what he did was out of line. He didn't even care. He started yelling back, and it scared me. Soon after, he started telling me what to eat, what to wear, making hurtful comments whenever no one was around to hear. And, God, I let it happen. When the divorce got finalized, we split everything 50-50ths, straight down the middle. There was even a payment plan for me to buy out his half of the house. We had shared custody, but the boys wanted to live with him. I haven't seen my two eldest daughters in so long. They don't answer my calls. I only found out one of them was in a serious relationship because my ex mentioned it offhandedly. Watching my ex sign the divorce papers hurt so much. When he took off his wedding ring and set it on the papers, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stared at that ring, and I just broke. I realized how badly I'd screwed up. I had destroyed my marriage, my family, and my relationship with my children. And I think I was in an abusive relationship. I cried so hard, barely able to breathe, but eventually, I signed those papers. And then, a week after the divorce, my lover, he hit me for the first time. It was so surreal. I was just talking about my day, and I accidentally bumped into the nightstand, knocking his phone onto the floor. He looked at me with this cold, disgusted expression, slapped me, and called me clumsy. I was in shock. The first person I called was my ex-husband. And, the first thing he asked me was, "Does he touch the kids?" I managed to stammer out, "No," and he just hung up. That night, I sobbed uncontrollably. I cried until I couldn't anymore, feeling like I deserved every bit of it. My ex-husband had never laid a hand on me, but my lover did, and for some messed up reason, I thought it was karma, some kind of twisted payback for what I did. For the next 2 months, my lover got more and more comfortable using his hands on me. And somehow, I kept thinking I deserved it. It only stopped when he hit one of my daughters. She had come home from college early, a surprise visit because of COVID. She was the only one of my kids who still wanted to stay with me. The older 2 girls stayed with their dad. When he hit her, that was when everything unraveled. It was just one phone call from her to my ex, and he was at my house in what felt like seconds. He offered my lover a free hit, daring him to strike first, before beating him into a bloody pulp. My ex was stone cold, emotionless. He was so detached, so terrifyingly calm as he beat the man who hurt our daughter. I had to physically pull him off to get him to stop. My ex looked at our daughter's bruised face and asked her, which hand did he use? And then he stomped on my lover's right hand, breaking it. When it was finally over, my ex dragged him outside, but not once did he look at me or acknowledge me. He took my lover to the hospital, calmly telling the ER that the guy had fallen down a flight of stairs. I don't know what they spoke about in the hospital, but the next day, my lover quit his job and left me. He was just gone. After that, I kept working, and my ex-husband started hooking up with some of my single friends, even a couple of my coworkers. One of them was the girl who convinced me to cheat in the first place. I only found out about it later when she complained at work, stressing over how my ex was ignoring her calls. She kept telling everyone how he bragged about blowing her back out. It stung, knowing he was doing that, and I'm pretty sure he did it on purpose. I tried dating a few guys, but nothing ever lasted. I mean, who wants a single mother of 5, right? The men would get scared off or, well, it just wouldn't work out. Even the sex, looking back, not even my lover could satisfy me the way my ex-husband could. And it made me wonder, why did I let any of this happen? Why did I throw away a good thing? I still can't wrap my head around it. Meanwhile, the house was unbearably quiet. My boys mostly stayed in their rooms or were at their dad's house. My daughters, except for the one who stayed with me, didn't want to talk to me. The distance hurt, like a constant ache. My ex could see how broken things had become, and he called a family meeting. He managed to get all the kids to come over, and for the first time in forever, I had all of them under one roof. I felt this flicker of happiness, but most of them didn't even want to be there. My youngest son, he was so angry. He called me a whore right there in front of everyone. The word cut through me, left me stunned. My ex slapped him right across the face. "Have I ever called your mother that?" he yelled. Our son just shook his head, and my ex continued, "Your mother loves you, she takes care of you, and you will respect her. What happened between us has nothing to do with you. Do you understand?" He looked at all the kids, and his words had this gravity to them. They listened. Little by little, things started to get better with my children. We began repairing our relationships, but it was slow. Really slow. By the second anniversary of our divorce, my ex and I were civil. We laughed together sometimes, talked about the kids, and he even came by the house to fix things. There were moments when I felt like I had him back, just for a little while. But one day, I leaned in, trying to kiss him, and he pulled back. He said, "No," and walked away. Not long after, he started dating our youngest son's teacher. She's 10 years younger than him, and they have so much in common. She's beautiful, smart, and I tried to be civil, but it hurt. It hurt seeing him look at her the way he used to look at me, watching him make her laugh and give her his undivided attention. And then, I understood why people used to envy us. They used to tell me how lucky I was. That devotion? I never truly appreciated it until it was gone. I had a nervous breakdown when I found out they were expecting a child and planning to get married. My ex was there when I woke up, sitting by my side, gently brushing my hair back. I just cried, begging him for forgiveness, for ruining our family. He didn't say a word. He just held me and let me talk. He visited me every day after that, only leaving to check in with his fiancée, who even came by to make sure I was okay. I didn't deserve that kindness from either of them, but there it was. She even found me a therapist, one they paid for. My therapist was blunt, painfully so. She said I was having a midlife crisis and that, instead of talking to my husband, I let a bunch of young women manipulate me. They wanted to sabotage my marriage, she explained, because misery loves company. They were single, bitter, and saw me as easy prey. And, well, the fact that one of them slept with my ex-husband only proved her point. Even after months of therapy, I still struggle with the guilt. It's overwhelming at times. My ex's new wife, she's a lovely person. She checks in on me often, even though I've tried to hate her. I can't. She's too good, too caring. Their twin boys are adorable, and my ex still comes by to check on me, reminding me that I'll always be the mother of his children, and he'll always be there, as a friend. He even came over last Saturday, letting me sleep while he cleaned the house and made breakfast. I broke down crying. I miss him so much. I miss my husband. I miss my best friend. To this day, I don't understand how I was so easily manipulated. I feel so alone. My kids are here, but we aren't as close as we used to be. And the one person I want most isn't. He's moved on, and it's all my fault. Someday, I'll move forward with my life, but for now, I deserve this. I deserve everything. Edit, I've been talking to someone in the messages, and I feel like I should clarify something. I wanted to share what my ex went through, but it doesn't feel like my place to discuss his pain. I tried to make amends so many times, but he didn't want anything to do with me. It didn't help that my affair partner kept hanging around, refusing to leave me alone. I felt trapped, even after everything fell apart. During the affair, I was in this weird haze. It's hard to describe, almost like an out-of-body experience. When I begged my ex to give me another chance, it was only days after he found out. He looked at me, but he just walked away. The only times he spoke to me were when he tried to be civil signing the divorce papers, when I called him after my lover hit me, and the day after he nearly killed my affair partner. That day, he unloaded everything. He told me how my stupid choices had destroyed him, how he couldn't even mourn our marriage properly because he had to stay strong for the kids. I just cried, knowing I broke the man who would have frozen hell over if I asked him to. I apologized, but he didn't want to hear it. He only said, "Your affair partner will never bother you again," and left. It took a whole year for us to have a real conversation. Before that, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. When he started hooking up with my friends and coworkers, I didn't say a word. I knew why he was doing it, and honestly, I felt like I deserved it. After the family meeting, he started being civil, for the kids' sake. And during that time, I realized the full extent of what I'd destroyed. I focused on mending things with my kids. I put everything into repairing those relationships. My youngest took the longest to come around, but I tried, God, I tried so hard. As they saw my efforts, they slowly opened up, though not fully. In the second year after our divorce, I watched my kids laugh, my ex joking around with them, grilling outside, dancing with our daughters. I thought maybe, if I kept showing him how sorry I was, I could win him back. I tried everything. I suggested couples counseling, dressed in outfits he liked, wore his favorite perfume, did my hair the way he liked it. But he just ignored me. That's when I tried to kiss him, thinking there was a moment. He stopped me, and I cried, begged. He just looked at me and said he couldn't be with me. I broke him. He told me he could never kiss me again because another man's lips had touched mine, never hold me because I let another man touch me, never sleep with me because I let another man lie beside me. I tried pointing out that he'd been with other women since our divorce, but he said, that was after our marriage. What you did was during our marriage. Your body and heart belonged to me, and mine to you. And you destroyed that. I'm trying to be his friend now, but it's so hard. I was married to this man for over 20 years, and I ruined it all in just 6 months. For what? A midlife crisis? My desperate need for female friends? An urge to fit in? Looking back, I don't even recognize who that person was. My third-born daughter was my saving grace. If she hadn't been there for me, I don't know if I'd still be here. I had no idea she was home that day. Usually the abuse happened when the kids were gone or when we were in the car, driving to or from work. When she saw my lover hit me, she jumped on his back, and when he hit me again, she tried to protect me. He threw her off and slapped her. I hit him, grabbed my daughter, and we ran into the garage. He banged on the door, but she called her father. My ex practically broke down the door to get to us, and I had to hold him back to stop him from killing my lover. His new wife? She's an angel, honestly. She's been through abuse herself and understands more than anyone. She's made it clear that if I ever overstep, she'll protect her family, but she also wants peace. My kids adore her, she was their English teacher, after all. Sometimes, the guilt becomes unbearable. Yes, I still work at that same company, but I'm now a manager. I eventually fired those women who egged me on. I knew all their dirty secrets, and it wasn't hard to get rid of them. But I still miss what I had. Now, on to the second story. Alright, so, here's the next part. I ghosted my entire family and my fiancé after what my sister did to me, and honestly, I could really use some advice. I don't know what to do anymore. I was 21 when my fiancé proposed. He was, like, the absolute light of my life. We'd known each other since preschool, and our families were super close. He'd come over to have dinner with us practically every day, and it was the same with me at his house. He was an only child, but I had 2 older sisters, which, turns out to be very important to the story. He was really close with them too, especially my middle sister, Nikki. We all grew up together. When my fiancé and I started dating, it felt like our parents didn't stop celebrating for weeks. He helped me through some of my worst anxiety struggles, and even when I gained some weight, which my mom never let me forget, he stood up for me. My mom would berate me, telling me he'd leave me because of how I looked, but he'd shut her down immediately. He'd say he loved me for who I was, not what I looked like, even though, to him, I was the most beautiful girl in the world. We were only engaged for 6 months when, well, the incident happened. So, Nikki, she's my middle sister, and she's always been cold. Very closed off, you know. She never really showed any affection, except to my fiancé. She'd say she saw him as the brother she never had, and he'd helped her through some really dark stuff, like drug addictions and even run-ins with the law. But she and I never saw eye to eye. I loved her because she was my sister, but, honestly, I never really liked her as a person. One day, out of nowhere, Nikki tells me she wants to take me clubbing. We'd never gone out together, not once, and she said she felt bad for being so distant and wanted to make it up to me. I was a bit surprised but figured, why not? That night, we went out. Clubbing really wasn't my thing, but, well, after a few drinks, I started loosening up and having fun. Everything was going great until Nikki spotted this guy across the room. She whispered to me that she wanted to climb him like a tree. Yeah, that's how she put it. She went over to talk to him, but within a few minutes, she came back looking seriously pissed. I asked her what happened, but she wouldn't say at first. I kept pressing, not wanting our night to be ruined. Eventually, she said the guy had turned her down. He didn't want her number, he wanted mine instead. I tried to brush it off, telling her he was probably a loser and that plenty of other guys in the club would be dying to get with someone like her. But she wasn't having it. Her mood soured. Then she told me she needed to use the restroom, and afterward, we'd leave. I waited for her, and waited. Over an hour passed, and during that time, I'd been sipping way too many cocktails. I started feeling really dizzy, lightheaded. When I realized she probably wasn't coming back, I decided I'd just get a cab home. But on my way out, I bumped into a guy who happened to be a friend of Nikki's. He was someone she'd briefly dated. He asked if I needed help getting to my car, and I explained I was trying to catch a cab. He offered to share one, saying he was heading out too, and I was feeling so dizzy, I just agreed. We got into the first cab we saw, but as I tried to find my phone in my purse, everything started to blur. I felt myself getting dizzier, and then I blacked out. The next thing I knew, I woke up on this hard, uncomfortable sofa with my head pounding. When I came to, I realized I was at Nikki's friend's house. My phone was sitting on the glass table in front of me, but it was dead. When he saw I was awake, he offered me some painkillers and water, explaining that I'd passed out in the cab. He said he didn't know my parents' address, so he'd brought me to his place and laid me on the sofa. I told him I needed to go home because my fiancé would be worried, and he called a cab for me. When I got home, though, I walked into the worst scene imaginable. My mom, dad, Nikki, my fiancé, and even his parents were all there, standing in the living room. I thought they were worried about me, but the second I opened my mouth, my fiancé asked me, "How could you do this to me?" I was so confused, I tried to explain that my phone had died, but he cut me off. He started yelling, demanding to know how I could cheat on him. I was baffled. Why would he think that? I tried explaining what happened, but they wouldn't let me get a word in. Nikki jumped in, calling me a lying slut and saying she saw me leaving the club, flirting with random guys all night. She claimed she saw me leaving with her friend, and it made me look terrible. Then she showed them a photo of me leaving the club, with her friend's hand on my back, guiding me outside. The photo looked damning, and I was so drunk that I hadn't even realized he'd put his hand there. My fiancé was livid. He kept shouting, and both his mom and mine were crying. I tried to defend myself, saying Nikki's friend could vouch for me, but when she called him, he lied. He told everyone I had begged him to take me back to his place and that we'd slept together multiple times. I saw red. I started screaming at Nikki, realizing she must have set the whole thing up. But no one believed me. I begged my fiancé to trust me, but he just shook his head and left. When everyone else left, my mom slapped me across the face, calling me horrible names, things I can't even repeat. She told me to get out. I had no idea what to do. I was homeless and single in less than 48 hours. My entire world collapsed because of Nikki's lies. I spent the next few days couch surfing, trying to call my fiancé and my family, crying and pleading for someone to believe me. But he never answered, and my mom wouldn't even give me time to collect my things. She threw everything out. None of my family would take me in. They all chose his side, leaving me to fend for myself. Weeks passed, and I kept trying to fix things, but nothing worked. The final blow was at Christmas. I went to my parents' house to try and reconcile, hoping for any sign of forgiveness. I was still crashing at friends' places. But when I knocked on the door, no one answered. A friend of mine called to tell me she'd seen on Facebook that my entire family had gone out of state to celebrate Christmas. They posted photos, all of them smiling, my sisters, my parents, my grandparents, even my fiancé and his family. I sat there looking at the pictures, feeling shattered. I cried for days. After that, I decided to cut them all off. I blocked everyone and returned my engagement ring. A friend helped me find a job a few hours away, working at a restaurant where I could also rent a tiny apartment above the place for cheap. It was exhausting, working over 10 hours a day, but I saved up a lot. Eventually, I moved into a nicer condo but kept working as an assistant manager at the restaurant. 2 years went by. I didn't speak to anyone from my family until, one day, there was a knock on my door. It was my ex-fiancé. Seeing him was a shock, and all these feelings rushed back. I almost slammed the door in his face, but he stopped me and asked to explain. He told me that Nikki had gotten married and confessed to what she did. Apparently, she found someone she truly loved and realized the damage she caused. He said my entire family had been trying to get in touch with me, and he found me through a mutual friend. I told him I needed time to think. Since then, I've been an emotional wreck. I don't know what to do. Nikki? I'll never forgive her. She can rot for all I care. But my fiancé and the rest of my family didn't know she was lying. Still, they abandoned me so quickly, without even hearing me out. I don't know if I should forgive them. Any advice would be really helpful. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Update. Wow, I didn't expect the outpouring of support. Thank you all so much for the kind words, advice, and even the awards. I tried to reply to as many comments as I could, but I'm still overwhelmed. I never got back to my ex-fiancé right away. I just didn't know how to process it all. Eventually, he must have given my number to my parents, because they texted me, asking to meet. I never replied. I thought about organizing a Zoom meeting but didn't have to, because my dad showed up at my door instead. When I opened the door and saw him, I ended up throwing up. He insisted on cleaning up, and when he finished, we sat down, and I just broke down in tears. Everything came flooding back, especially the familiar smell of his cologne. He tried to hug me, but I pushed him away, asking why he was there. He told me he and my mom were getting a divorce. He said he had begged her to reach out to me, but she refused. She called me a baby and said I needed to deal with the consequences. I asked him how long it took them to notice I was gone. He said they only realized when they got home after New Year's Eve and planned to talk to me, but then they learned from my friend that I had moved. I asked why they never listened to me or why they threw me away so easily. He started crying, saying he wished he could take it all back. I reminded him how they defended Nikki through all her mistakes, like her drug use and dropping out of school. We even took a family holiday to help her, and during that trip, she got addicted to alcohol. Yet, they always stood by her. He said he had no idea my mom was going to kick me out and thought it was temporary. But when they decided to go out of state for Christmas, she promised him I'd come home afterward. Apparently, she lied about throwing my stuff out, it was all still there. He told me that Nikki was dead to him. He wanted nothing to do with her, but my mom had been begging him to forgive her. She kept saying they couldn't lose 2 daughters. He had blocked both Nikki and my mom, and he'd been pushing my ex-fiancé to find me. My ex finally caved and gave him my address. I told my dad he couldn't come back unless I gave him permission. He agreed, asking what would happen next. I told him I didn't know, that he had hurt me deeply. I explained how abandoned I felt, how they all seemed so happy without me. We were both crying by the end of it, but it felt good to finally say everything I'd been holding inside. It was like a weight lifted off my chest. He offered to help me find a better apartment, even a better job, but I declined. My boss had been there for me when no one else was, and I wanted to stay out of loyalty. I said I'd reconcile with him, but only on my terms. It was going to take a long time to trust him again, if ever. He agreed and promised he'd do anything to make it up to me. I asked him why Nikki did this. He said she told him that she thought my fiancé deserved better than me. She wanted to see him happy because, in her twisted mind, he was making too many sacrifices. She'd even staged that night at the club, telling her friend to lie so she could save him. My dad left, but not before writing down Nikki's husband's number. After he left, I called Nikki's husband, terrified of what I'd find out. He sounded confused, but I blurted out everything. Turns out he had suspected she was lying. Apparently, Nikki had caused problems between him and his sister, even making up stories. His sister didn't attend their wedding because of it. I told him he should make amends with his sister because Nikki was the problem, not her. I don't know what he'll do, but I hope he leaves her. He seemed like a good guy who deserved better. As for my dad, I've decided to slowly reconcile. He's finally standing up to my mom and Nikki, so, maybe he's serious. But my mom? I don't think I'll ever forgive her. She still sees Nikki as the victim, and I'm done making excuses for her. My ex wanted to come with my dad to see me, but my dad told him it'd be too overwhelming for me. Apparently, my ex was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend after he found out the truth. The charges were dropped, but still, it was messy. I'll update again once I talk to him. Thank you all so much for your patience and kindness.